Alistair Russell, just to remind you. I have two affiliations. One is I chair, as Jo said when she introduced me, and lead the consulting activities of my business, CIO Connect, who work with people like you. We work in Europe, Hong Kong and Singapore. And the other important affiliation I have, and why Abby from Inspired Business Media, and one of her reasons for saying we like people who have things beyond their activity in their corporate life, is I chair something called Bite Night, and I'll say something about that at the back end of the day when I've got you at your most susceptible. But it's an initiative that's been going for about 21 years now. 21 years ago, a good friend of mine, Ken Deeks, slept out with 30 of his mates to raise money to support and enable the work of Action for Children to prevent and handle homeless youngsters. So I chair the Northeast board for that, and through that I've actually got my first decent non-exec role. So I'm now on the board of Action for Children myself as part of my career path. But the important thing I wanted to remind myself of is take care with cultural differences. I have said things in Hong Kong that were related to British comedy programs that nobody got, and that was where I first learnt. Don't use cultural references that don't work. Anyway, the most important thing we're here to do is to my message when I said the opening remarks earlier this morning was to learn from. I've just lost my mic. The powerful thing we have from earlier on in terms of Silicon Valley, tech startup, and some. We have AJ from Barclays Bank and Claire from City University in London, and Trevor from a fantastic business that I'm pleased to meet, and some of my guitar-playing colleagues at breakfast were also very pleased to meet. A brilliant global OEM that makes stuff associated with set recording and working with sound, and then the services associated with it. But our focus today is on enabling that customer centricity. So if digital is about, it is about enabling those business models that you were talking about earlier, Paul. It's about enabling digital and digital first, and customer centricity is really important. But the thing that the guys here in IBM are looking for us to talk about in this panel is, okay, yeah, but that depends deeply on technology enabling the value chain that delivers that. So it's not just about the Wizzy app, it's not just about the way that the customers, the end customers, engage with you. It's the work that all of you do to enable that shift in business model, and particularly in a bank that started by a collaboration over many years of a few families. How you leverage the data and the legacy and the brand that you have, for example, in this bank. So that's the focus of our conversation: is how do you enable that. I have a few questions and shared them with my colleagues on the panel to get us started. But as I said, also, this is for you. The event is for you. So if there is a particular thing you'd like me to ask, I'll come to you towards the end of the panel. So to make sure you have time to challenge and to make sure you learn from this session. So first of all, I'll ask each of my colleagues on the panel, and I'll start with you, Trevor, if I may. Yeah? Is that okay? So I think if we get a sense of, I gave you a brief overview of each of the businesses and organizations we've got here, but I'll ask each of my panelists to say how their team are enabling the value they're bringing to their organization. Yeah, if we just use that as a sort of opening question from each of you, just so the audience get a sense of what's important for you right now, Trevor. So there you go.
Okay, so Focusrite is, we have 4 brands. So our number 1 brand is Focusrite, which is basically audio interfaces for musicians. So if you want to plug your guitar into your computer and record off it, that's our major market. Second brand is Novation, which is synths and Launchpad. If you recently saw the Eurovision Song Contest winner, she had on her plinth in front of her when she was using all the singing was one of our devices, or 3 of our devices actually, to do that. We also have another brand called Amplify, which is number 1 downloaded app for music on iOS. And we also have our Focusrite Pro who work with recording studios, TV, and that type of thing. So we got to look at value. I have 4 distinct customers internally, and I also have 15, 20 million customers outside from a value proposition point of view. So I remember during my interview with our CEO, it comes to one of your comments earlier, I actually asked him what he sees IT as. Are we just a cost center? Are we part of this innovation journey? Or are we part of this value proposition? And he said he wants us to be part of that value proposition, part of that innovation, to help develop the company where it wants to go. So for me, value for us internally is our data. At the moment, our data is in disparate sources. I have, as I say, 12, 15 million customers where I don't have a huge amount of data on them. I actually have a huge amount of data, but I'm not using that data. So for us, the value that I or my team will bring to the organization initially is probably getting that data into some sources and then developing BI, machine learning, to allow us to then develop that next generation of products that keep us as number one in our markets. So value is, I think from us, that would be the biggest value for us, is the data for our customers.
Brilliant, thank you. And Claire, in the world of many thousands of students turning up at the end of September and want to hack their devices off your network, what's the
That's right. Well, providing IT for 20,000 students and 2,500 to 5,000 staff, it's scalable. Tends to be largely operational. The exciting stuff comes really in the research opportunities, spinning things up very quickly for research projects. But what I'm about is looking at personalization. How do we personalize that student experience? And I guess I'm trying to identify what I consider to be the muddy fields, and I'll explain that phrase. I was at an event recently with Paul Lampkin, who is the CIO for Brussels Airline. And he explained that when he'd taken over as CIO at Brussels Airline, he went to this thing called the Tomorrowland Festival. Anybody been there? Anybody know of it? Oh, we've got one raver at the back. So the Tomorrowland Festival is this massive music festival in Europe, and it takes place over 2 weekends, two consecutive weekends in July. And Paul went along to this because he was in Brussels anyway, he was working out there. And he suddenly realised that there were hundreds of thousands of people twice yearly over these 2 consecutive weekends coming through his airline, through the airport in Brussels, landing at this particular destination, raving in muddy fields, and then shipping themselves back again. So he extended his value proposition to basically collect all of their luggage in the muddy fields, which I thought was genius. So I'm trying to identify where our muddy fields are.
Yeah, moments of truth. It's an earlier. And in the world, AJ, you were saying earlier, your focus is on corporate banking, so not retail, but where's value coming from what you're doing?
Yeah, so many of you would have heard of Barclays, 325-year-old bank, 326 this year. So obviously a lot of kind of legacy infrastructure debt. My role and my team look at innovation and emerging technology. So we really have kind of 4 responsibilities. One is, what is our 3 to 5 year strategy and beyond, our business strategy, and then how does technology support that or enable that. 2 is very much research based. So looking into new and emerging technologies, providing that research back to our corporate customers, telling them how this could impact their business, and also how we're adapting our products and propositions using that technology. The third part is very much execution focused, so running proof concepts, experimentation pilots, and I know, Paul, you mentioned that's key to kind of testing these technologies, and I've got a really good story about a few that failed that saved us millions of pounds. And 4th part of our team's role is very much client-facing. So we spend a lot of time now, and a lot of our technologists spend a lot of time with customers, out at these client meetings with relationship directors, understanding what are their needs, how can we add value beyond just the core banking products, and start to kind of commoditize new technologies and provide them with additional services.
And are you happy to share some of those stories later on?
Yeah, of course.
I'll come to you to do that, because I think there are too many of these events where CIOs will take great pleasure in telling the facts. I mean, all of you are very successful. You wouldn't be here today and still in your roles if you weren't incredibly successful. So hold on to that. But I know some of the most horrible lessons. I still draw on them. I still draw on Yes. Yeah. I remember I was at the when I had a good chunk of time in PA consulting group. So when you're up for partner in PA, you go to this middle of the year thing where all of the PA potential partners around the world. So it's mostly male, Claire, and it's very, very sort of shark-infested waters because you all know you're competing for this. And I got to do this role play in front of all of my peers of how to handle a difficult conversation with a member of your practice. And actually, I was terrible, but I still draw on that lesson. So I'll come to you, AJ, to learn that. And so we're getting loads of you today, sir.
I didn't sign up. You signed me up, so I apologize. Yeah, at least we don't have to go over the funny accent anymore.
Exactly. No, we don't have to do that.
Yeah.
But to get a bit more granular, then we got the big picture from you just now. But in terms of you and your team delivering value and enabling Box to continue to be successful, what are you working on right now?
So, well, I think when you're at a company that is where you're surrounded sort of by engineers. First off, as a technology leader in a company that is a technology company at heart, there's no shortage of advice on how you can do your job better. I tell you that. Everybody can be a CIO. It's easy, right? Yeah. So there's a few different hats, and I think that's one of the nice things about being a CIO is that you do get the opportunity to wear lots of different hats depending on what type of company you're in. So, as I mentioned earlier, we as a company, we're now 50 million users of Box around the world, 70,000 plus companies, 70% of the Fortune 500. Our install base is massive, and it's interesting. We talk about the music industry. One of our more, I say, interesting use cases is we do a lot with the movie and music industry. In fact, Adele's last album and Beyonce's last album were distributed off the Box. And if anybody's familiar with the song "The Middle," the new song "The Middle," with Zed, that just actually there's a whole bunch of stuff flying around that they actually went through. The whole process of how they built that song, collaborating with people all over like a 12-month period, and throughout the process, they actually were using Box for the. So we're used in so many different use cases. It's almost boundless. Hundreds of thousands of users at any single company, and so on. But so part of one of the hats that I wear, of course, is how are we going to grow and scale our business? Mm-hmm. As a company that is growing as quickly as we are. How do we make sure that we enable our employees to be as productive as possible? We have one set of programs around workplace productivity. Mm-hmm. How do we take the work out of work? How do we create seamless, frictionless experiences for our employees? What's it like to be an employee at Box? Mm-hmm. And how do we? It's not about how do we respond to things. It's how do we eliminate things from even occurring in the first place. So just like we think about creating digital experiences for our partners and suppliers, how do we think about that internally as well? We want to get out of the way and have our employees be as productive as possible. The other piece is of course, also being connected externally to the external CIO and CISO community as well. It's very important. Feedback is a gift. Mm-hmm. Whether you like what you hear or don't like what you hear, sometimes it is a gift at the end of the day that you can do something with. And quite frankly, professional chemistry being what it is, CIOs prefer to talk to other CIOs, and so do I. No different. And so it's a great opportunity for me to leverage those relationships and the community for feedback that I can internally bring back to the organization. And then of course cybersecurity. So I have responsibility for cybersecurity. The CISO in the organization reports into my organization. And if you can imagine the things that we talk about the most at Box. Interestingly, last year the 3 most requested people in our innovation center were our Chief Compliance Officer, our CISO, and the CIO. Mm-hmm. It wasn't about features, it wasn't about capabilities, it was about compliance and regulatory and trust, it was around security, and it was around the real practical aspects from a CIO perspective. So I also have the security aspects, including product cybersecurity as well. Yeah. So that's a lot going on in there.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things I continue value about working for and working with CIOs is the number of personas you have to adopt. Yeah. That controlling and constraining and stopping whilst enabling, and I think that's what makes it such a fun job in my view. Okay, so
It's also why I don't have that flock of seagulls haircut anymore.
well, a Danish guy has been cutting my hair for a number of years, and he told me that less is more. So this is about as long as my hair gets these days.
I just don't get any more. I'm stuck more.
Okay, so getting into this topic of, okay, so it's enabling digital customer centricity in a whole different set of contexts. The first thought I thought, because I'm an engineer, as I said, how are you doing that? You know, we can no longer, I think, support loads of business analysts running workshops, process mapping the hell out of a student journey or a customer journey for a corporate. How are you doing this? Would be my first question. How are you starting to deeply understand the value chain that delivers an outcome for your clients? How are you doing that? I'll go to anybody that's sort of ready to pitch in, and if no one else is, Trevor, go.
So for us, it's MVPs, mean viable products.
Yeah.
We have a lot of developers in our company, about half the company's developers. So we're not quite there yet, but we're going down that philosophy of let's get something out there, let's learn from it. If it fails, learn the lessons from it. As you probably got a story about failure you're going to talk about. So that's what we're trying to do. We're going to do with, going forward. So get the product, then base sprints off it. So at the moment we're doing a new website. So it's quite a simple philosophy is let's get it mean viable product of the website out there. It's not going to be 100% perfect, but then we'll put sprints in with the customer feedback and internal feedback to then fix those issues and enhance it. So rather than taking 18 months to get this perfect looking website that is probably old now by then, we're going to get a website out there as soon as we possibly can and then develop off the back of it based on feedback. So learn our lessons, grow from that point of view.
And as soon as possibly can is days or weeks? Or
this is, it's in June, end of July, so soon. So it's
Okay.
instead of it taking 18 months, it's taken us 3 months.
I was just trying to get a sense of the cycle time.
Yes, about 3 months rather than 18 months. So
Yeah.
then we'll have sprints every week or two weekly sprint, 2 weeks of sprints based on whatever feedback is needed, and the team will develop on that.
Yeah.
So that's a quick way to get the site where we want it to be, based on our customers, because we don't know, if we could understand what we believe they want, but until you put it out there, we could have wasted 18 months of work.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. Anything to add from anybody else's experience about how you're doing this? Claire?
Chatham House rules, right?
Absolutely.
So higher education is a very political organisation to work within and quite complex. I liken it to the NHS in terms of some of the layers of complexity that you have to get across. And we have two kind of key programs of work at the moment around the student journey, which frankly have taken about 3 years to get to where they are, and where they are is not very far. So I've decided to adopt more of a stealth approach and to look at 3 different opportunities to deliver things quickly alongside, whilst not conflicting with this student journey work, alongside that. And I think I try and summarise it by looking for performance. So what is it that the organisation is looking to achieve? And I think one of the main areas around performance for a university at the moment is progression. For those of you that are not familiar with higher education, that's the dropout rate between first and second year, which is notoriously the area that universities lose their customers, their stakeholders. So what can we do around that? And there's a lot around data analytics, monitoring engagement and attendance. The second key thing is where are people experiencing pain? Where are our students experiencing pain? Where are our stakeholders experiencing pain? And there's some great opportunities there, particularly when you look at machine learning and artificial intelligence or chatbots even. So a couple of initiatives there around the clearing process. A student rings up, they say, I haven't quite made the grade on these, and they could get put on hold and left on hold to the point where we lose them. We could put in machine learning algorithms to automatically reroute these key students and divert them onto programs that would otherwise retain them as a student for us. And of course, things like customer service, those are obvious opportunities where you've got standard questions year on year asked by students, by thousands of students, resulting in the same answer, key opportunities for chatbots and so on.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of things that we're looking at the moment. But as I say, I'm trying to deliver some of those by stealth and some above board.
Yes, yes, the secret leadership stuff.
Well, yeah, just quick wins.
Yes,
You know,
yeah.
we can do a lot very, very quickly,
Yeah.
providing we have the capacity to do that, and the rest of the stuff can be the stuff that people focus on.
Yeah. Okay. From AJ or Paul, or shall I move us on?
I think very similar approach.
Yeah.
So it's the kind of test and learn,
Yes.
quick wins, whilst maintaining an eye on the long-term strategy and pivoting that strategy.
Yes.
So one of the challenges we have within the bank is people are rewarded on a 12-month cycle.
Yes.
So your bonuses are based on your performance in the last year. So sometimes people may not see past that 12-month period. And it's striking that balance of what can you achieve in the short term while delivering long-term value as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So I would add, actually, it's in echoing a lot of what we just heard, is one of the advantages we have today when we start to leverage newer technologies is they've been architected in a way that they're capturing sort of the forensics and sort of the A/B testing. It's all built into these services, and the ability to get access to, we call it CSI, the Customer Sophistication Index. It's the sophistication with which you're using a particular service. And those aren't, it's not, we have that built into the box service, of course, and we can use that to help our customers, but it's also built into other services that we use to run our business. And we all invest in technology and want to get as much value, extract as much value out of those services as possible. And we often find that we are woefully getting less value out of the capabilities. Like, hey, we buy the Ferrari and we go to the corner store and back in first gear. And the reality of it is that we need those forensics, we need those insights, we need that data to help us. And that's actually a lot of what we do as well. The other thing I would add, and this is something that we've started to adopt more recently, I don't know if folks are familiar with a book called Uncommon Service. Anybody here familiar with Uncommon Service? And I think what unfortunately happens a lot of time is we default to trying to do everything really well, and we measure everything on these certain SLAs and certain metrics and response times and how quickly we close tickets and so on and so forth. And in reality is when you try to do everything really, really well, you end up kind of being mediocre at most things. And the Uncommon Service approach is really, look, at what point is a certain area good enough? Right? It's like, oh, we close this type of ticket in 24 hours. How do we get it down to 12? It's like, you know what? Maybe 24 is actually better than it should be anyway. But how do we make sure that we're diverting, more of our resources and our mind share, whatever that's, funding or people or whatever, to the things that are actually strategically going to make a difference? And so it's really hard for us psychologically to say we're not going to be good at something, but we're going to be really good at this.
Focus,
yeah.
And I think the other important theme for me that's coming from that is the clock speed and getting that cycle time much faster. I mean, it's your point. Jonathan Smart, I know quite well in Barclays, and that's his lead idea in getting that pace, even to the traditional waterfall stuff. He's bringing that pace there. Okay, and this requires new sorts of people. So the other thing that I actually, it's my field of endeavour anyway, is capability of people in our world. Where are you getting these people that can do this stuff, that can lead the MVP? I mean, I imagine they might not be Komsky graduates. They might be, but they might not be. Claire, where are you getting the people to do the stuff, this stealth work of yours?
Well, my current solutions architect is an astrophysicist.
Okay.
Just cross-skilled, because, if you think about it, they can take big picture stuff and make real sense of it and articulate it back to people. And I'm a big believer in transferable skills. I'm a big believer in looking way outside our usual market. And saying, what are the real capabilities, what are the real attributes we're looking for, and how can we train the tech stuff?
Yes, yeah. And are others finding that sort of attitude first, ability second? Learn R or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I've just had a business analytics manager, and her background is astrophysics, actually, strangely enough, and physics. And so her background's in physics, but she knows data. She can understand big data. She can conceptualize it basically. So, so we hired her as a sort of based on that we believe she's never done the role before, but it's working out very well because it's cross-training. So, but she can see that big data, she can understand big numbers and put it into very simple terms. So very similar to what you're working on.
And are you finding the IT organisation is becoming more porous? People are coming in from the bank into your world, AJ? I mean,
yeah, I think for us, what we're seeing is we've got a huge technology team, right? 40,000 people across the globe. So it's not a question of bringing in people. It's more of a question of how do we unlock that talent who are locked into large change programs and allow them to shift between long-term projects to short-term solutions. And I think most of our people have a kind of intrinsic need to be creative, and giving them that capacity in their roles to show that creativity and come up with their own solutions is what we're focusing on now. And it's that cultural change within the organisation we're trying to go down. We do kind of do a lot of partnerships with fintechs, with SI partners, with other technology vendors, but traditionally we've not given our internal talent that capacity and the tools to be able to show that creativity, and that's where we're putting a lot more focus now.
That's an interesting point that I didn't actually put on the questions we shared beforehand, but that whole ecosystem that enables the delivery. I mean, it was your slide there when you were using the use case of Uber and how they integrate and put together a set of building blocks. I mean, is the ecosystem of suppliers out with your own team, is that really important for you in Box as well, Paul?
No, it is.
Yeah.
I actually think that traditionally, some of this is a mindset and a culture as well. It's sort of, which is tricky when you say what's that skill set, right? Which is why I think finding talent that's sort of adaptable and so on is really important, because today it takes a much more of an outside-in mindset versus an inside-out mindset. When we think inside-out, we often are making change to improve something when somebody's interacting with us, versus how do we take an outside-in view and say, how do we eliminate the need for the interaction in the first place? How do we work really, really, really hard for people to not know we're there? And it is a mindset shift, and the value you get from it is sort of in the sort of the NPS side of things. It's not a like I said, it's not like an SLA or how quickly you respond. And I think that's a cultural thing. It's how do you, and unfortunately, I think a lot of organizations get measured in a way that drives the behavior. And unfortunately, I think it's the wrong behavior that gets driven because of that. If people feel like they have to be defensible to their value, whereas if you work in an organization where the culture is one that doesn't measure you on that, you're able to then spend time on things that I think are far higher value add to the productivity of an organization. It's not necessarily a skill set thing at that point. It's almost being given permission through the culture of your organization to be able to go do that.
And to pick up your point about measurement, are you measuring different things, Trevor, from what you might have done 10 years ago when you were a CIO in a university in the UAE?
Well, yes and no, because you still have that business as usual run mode stuff that you have to provide to the business. But then now it's the CIO role has changed to be more across the business, helping, as you said earlier, it's not, IT is not doing all the ideas anymore. That it's changed now that we're working with our partners in the business, so marketing teams, our product teams, to make sure that IT provides that foundation for them to deliver what they need to deliver. So the metrics on that are, obviously marketing has their metrics, we have our metrics, and I help support them on their metrics. So it's more, we have the standard SLAs that you'd have for normal business, but it's more trying to partner with our business partners to make sure that they're doing what they need to do to grow the business.
Yeah. And are you getting more of that recognition of end-to-end service provision?
Yes. Yeah, so that's the whole principle of one of the reasons we are doing on your website is for our customers is to have that personalised experience, to allow them to potentially look at subscription models, all that type of stuff. But that's not, that's, again, we're just providing the platform and some of the innovation ideas, but the business is the one driving that.
Yeah. Well, AJ, innovation is terribly difficult thing to measure and to encourage.
Yeah.
Because the simple things are the things you don't really want to measure, really. You don't want to measure and drive people by number of ideas generated, because you just end up with a... I started work in an organisation that doesn't exist, ICI, to your point about things dropping off of the Fortune 500. So ICI was a very traditional British global corporate, imperial chemical industries. You can't get more British than that. But we still had suggestion schemes and all of that malarkey. I mean, how are you measuring your success as what do they call you? Head of Innovation and Emerging Technologies.
Just on your point around kind of how do you generate ideas from the workforce? I saw an interesting one. We had a suggestion box, an electronic suggestion box. I saw a really great one last week. Someone asked whether we can put bins under every desk to stop them having to walk to the one bin that's in the kitchen. And they were making a play there around efficiency and time save. But we're still measured on the same KPIs that the business are measured on.
Yes.
So my team have a ring-fenced investment, almost an R&D grant, let's say, and we're accountable to the board. And we're responsible for showing a return on that investment. Mm-hmm. All of our initiatives we kind of put forward to that board. We get them prioritised, and we get that investment, the seed funding, almost like an internal startup within the organisation. And on that board, you've got the heads of tech, operations, product, kind of all as peers on there. So it's not being driven by any single tower.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would add, we actually have it in some ways built into our values as a company. So, when you look at sort of box values, it goes to sort of driving the culture this way. We have things like bring your blank self to work, 10x, 10x it. There's these things that generate or give you permission to think about things, whether it is and that might not have been a bad idea, each bin under the desk. It's sort of, that's how the ability to, like I mentioned earlier, feedback is a gift, right? The ability to have a voice, feel like you're an owner, be an owner, right? Make mom proud. These are things that are, built into, if you're going to make a decision, before you make that decision, think about it. Is this something that would make your mom proud? Or mum proud. I go back to, I'm translating back now, make mum proud. These are the types of things that we actually have in our values. If you look at a Box badge or ID, I don't know if you have one, someone from Boxshare has one, our values are on the back. And if you read them, it tells you sort of the type of company we are.
Yeah, and it's at that abstract level, but I think the important thing is the day-to-day behaviour and picking that up, I think, and shifting that is really important. So an opportunity for you to tell some of your failure stories, AJ. But Claire, I jumped through you because I was intrigued by measuring innovation, and I just wanted to hear from you on that.
I'm afraid I've just brought my blank self. I can go no further. Yeah.
But before I sort of come to all of our colleagues out here and make sure we address questions they're interested in, to do a bit of outside in rather than things I've invented or we've invented to talk about. Lessons learned. So things that you would say to the 21-year-old or the 25-year-old Claire to take, do more of this or do less of that, wherever you want to go.
I think my big lessons are around change management, and that was my background prior to technology, and it's borne out as much today as it has been in my earlier career, particularly manifested at the moment. Don't try and that really old expression, boil the ocean. Just look at the opportunities. Where there's energy, go and maximise on the opportunities and the energy that you've got there. Target coalitions of the willing, bring those people together, because they will actually provoke and provide and produce outstanding results. Yeah,
good old Mr. Cotter. Yeah, in amongst all of those GDPR emails, he was there actually. Mr.
Oh, was he?
And AJ, what have you learnt about making this all happen? And are there any failures you would happily share under the Chatham House rule that Claire reminded us of?
So yeah, this is, I'll give you an example of one of our proof of concepts that did fail. So bearing in mind that I'm on the corporate side of the bank, so our customers are 6.5 million turnover per annum all the way up to global corporates, very different needs to retail customers. We thought it was a fantastic idea to bring in digital signatures, so we partnered with DocuSign. There was a particular form that we were piloting this on, which our customers had to pass around different offices to get wet signatures on. So we went through an entire cycle through our kind of change governance forums, through legal compliance, got them comfortable with this. It took around 6 months, and we tested this out. Turns out none of the corporates that we piloted this with wanted to use it because they didn't see the pain. Their PA will bring them 40 pieces of paper to sign in the morning, and then for us to tell them, oh, you need to log onto your emails and click a button to sign the form from Barclays, it just wasn't a pain point for them. So whilst it was a fantastic technology, fantastic idea, it would have cut down cycle times, customers just didn't want it.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you, AJ. And Trevor, a lesson learnt, and then I'll turn to our colleagues.
Probably on this role, I haven't been there long enough, I'd say. Yes. So probably in a university setting, we're very similar. We tried to roll out a new app for our students, and we probably didn't communicate enough with those students, and so the app failed basically. So the lesson is let's get your stakeholders more involved, and actually the next app we launched was very successful based on that fact that the students had more control over it and more input into it. So that's probably a big failure, that was.
So design-led thinking.
The faculty, we basically had a set of faculty design in it, and they sort of didn't come out quite as we thought for the students.
And what you got in terms of a lesson learned, Paul, from recent experience?
A lot of lessons learned over recent experience. Okay. Well, I think that, back to your point, I don't know if that was a technology failure, right, as much, and this is what I was saying earlier today, right? You have these two types of projects, and I was jesting,
No, it's good.
Successful business projects and IT failures, right? Because when it doesn't work, it's an IT failure. I actually think that, I don't know if there are as much as failures as there are strategies to figure out if something's going to be successful or not. And then if it's not, I don't know if you declare that as a failure. I think it's a failure when you presume and you roll out something more broadly and you've invested significantly in something and it doesn't get adopted or whatever. And the DocuSign one's an interesting one. I mean, I think that, a generation from now, they'll be like, what are you doing dropping off piles of paper, right? Is that a technology thing or is that a generational thing? But back to our digital natives and digital transients earlier. But I also think that, when you roll out in sort of small batches of things. I mentioned earlier the Amazon experimentation we're doing with the Echo and one floor for one set of conference rooms. We had our inclination was that we roll this out across 9 floors of a building with 1,000 people in it, and everybody's going to use it because everybody uses Amazon or Google Google Home or Siri on their phones all the time, and having a voice interactive experience in a conference room was something that everyone was just going to adapt to, and we found the number one thing was unplugging, right, powering it off because they didn't trust. So to me, it's sort of the strategy for how you test out these things. So could we have rolled it out and spent lots of money and then it would have been a failure. So in this case, I don't necessarily call it a failure as much as it was a strategy to prove out. And I think, and at some point, this is going to come back.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting plays is to actually own the word failure and actually say I love it, and really get that within your team.
It's like saying I'm going to suck at something.
Yeah, exactly. So to get some outside, so you've been very quietly and patiently listening, or even checking your emails because it wasn't very interesting. Abby, you've got a mic. Anybody got some questions for our panel? Whoa. Sir, I don't know your name.
David.
David, which organisation are you from?
I work for Pearson.
Pearson, interesting. Pearson Education, Pearson Publishing?
Pearson Education.
All right.
So we've been busy divesting a lot of our sort of traditional publishing business over the last few years. So we're now 100% focused on education of various types.
And a mate of mine, I didn't realise that Pearson runs schools around the world, which is interesting. So there you go. Anyway, your question, sir.
Yeah, I'm interested in whether there's any merit in separating out sort of legacy technology from emerging and enabling technologies. So do you need different types of people to do those two things? Yeah. And does it create a them and us culture if you do put that environment in place?
Yeah.
Just
interesting question.
Thoughts.
Yeah. I must admit, I've seen both plays fail and both plays work. So back in the day when FT.com was established and it was separate from FT, general IT, and it was successful. But I don't know if you, I mean, in Barclays, I mean, anybody got any experiences to share of, when you have, Claire, you have highly federated, you have lots of people spinning a bit of infrastructure or putting a server under a desk, and
well, we did. We've spent the last 4 years centralising and outsourcing the commodity IT, building a very strong nucleus of highly skilled people actually, and upskilling and reskilling people. I don't know that I have an answer to your question. I tend to think of all of our team as being hugely talented, and therefore, they're up for change. They're up for reskilling and looking at new technologies and new ways of working. And I think, by definition, if you're not up for that, you kind of fall by the wayside and start to look elsewhere. I'm not sure that particularly answers your question. Yeah. I would like to say something else in reference to your earlier point, though, Paul, which is around, is not quite good enough. Our strategy for the last few years has been sector average technology at the core and sector leading technology where it actually hits the student experience. And I think, declaring that actually gives you permission to say this is as good as it needs to be.
Yeah. I do have a comment as well, and it's I don't like it. I think it creates this, it's like this bimodal thing. I think it's a way to explain something, to think about it, but unfortunately it's like, okay, this is where the cool kids go to work on the new stuff, and you guys get to go work over here. And it just creates a cultural and just a set of, I think, internal dynamics that aren't healthy to an organization. And I think it's I don't know anybody that's really a fan of describing it that way, because immediately people will start to compartmentalize. Am I on this side of the line, that side of the line? What's that message that's telling me? I think there are different ways to do it than sort of sector it out organizationally.
I mean, the people at Radbrook Hall, are they separate from you, or do you use them?
I mean, we do use them.
Yeah.
No, I think the way we've set up is we've set up as a separate kind of team, but we draw upon the capacity within the larger organisation. So we are there as enablers to create virtual teams around projects or proof of concepts or ideas, and anyone's able to come up with that idea and pitch for that funding, and we give them the support and the skill set, if they don't have that, to be able to deliver their kind of proposition or solution. I think the challenge with segregating it out is then bringing it back into the legacy infrastructure. So if you've built a nice solution on the outside of your main infrastructure, when you then want to deploy it in production, you then face the same challenges that you would have done if you were to build it inside anyway. So it's kind of driving that balance. How do you test it quickly outside of your legacy infrastructure so you can get that answer, yes or no, this doesn't work, but then how do you transition that in quickly? And I think it's taking the entire organisation on that journey, not just creating that separate team.
Yeah, but sometimes you have to start outside, is my experience. Abby, I haven't sent a time signal from you for a little while. How am I doing?
Maybe one more question if anyone has one.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, go, sir? He's partially committed to this question, I noticed. Go for it.
Just maybe a comment. So on the failure thing, I really think it's important that this fail fast message is actually starting to fail in the organizations, because nobody wants to use the term failure. So over the years, we started to adopt the term, it's empirical experimentation. It's basically getting data-driven, continuous experimentation, small batch sizes, low cycle times through the system. Nobody wants to fail, but also setting it up within an organization without actually changing the systems around it. You know, even from HR, telling your people you're going to want to do empirical experimentation while HR KPIs is still saying if you fail, then you don't get a bonus. You know, that creates, to your point, also a segregation in your workforce. You know, you want me to experiment, but if I do, I'm penalized financially. So it's really important that whatever we discuss here, from that point of view, is an organizational thing. Hence me also not liking the segregation of, you know, digital to the side or digital DNA.
Yeah.
You know, it's an organizational problem. Treat the root cause, not the symptom. And
Exactly.
I think it's easy to make yourself look nice, look fantastic. You know, putting lipstick on a pig, if you put it in a different building, you know, close to the harbor, you know, you put bean bags on the floors, make it look millennial. But have you really solved the problem? That's the thing here. And I think a lot of conversations needs to happen around what is the DNA of the organization to change.
Thank you. And could you just, your affiliation, who's we when you said you're we?
Well, currently I'm with BAT.
BAT?
Yeah.
Interesting organisation. Thank you. I'll close it there. Ladies and Claire and chaps, thank you. That was brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.